Welcome to A1 Storyteller. I'm your host, and today we're diving into a powerful and gripping tale that will leave you on the edge of your seat. This isn't just any story. It's a tale of resilience, justice, and the transformative power of one man's courage. So sit back, relax, and let's embark on this incredible journey together. It was a typical Monday morning in the bustling city of Newbridge. The streets were filled with the usual hustle and bustle, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air. Officer Mark Thompson, a middle-aged white man with a reputation for being a bit hot-headed, was patrolling the downtown area. He had been with the Newbridge Police Department for over a decade and had seen his fair share of trouble. As he turned the corner onto Main Street, he spotted a man standing outside a small cafe. The man was tall, with a commanding presence, and was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit. He was talking animatedly with the cafe owner, a friendly woman named Maria. Officer Thompson's eyes narrowed. He had a particular dislike for black men, a prejudice that had festered over the years. He saw them as troublemakers, a threat to the order he was sworn to uphold. As he approached the man, his mind was already made up. "You," Thompson barked, striding up to the man. "What are you doing here?" The man turned, his expression calm and composed. "Good morning, officer. I'm just having a conversation with Maria here. Is there a problem?" Thompson's face twisted into a sneer. "You got a permit to stand around and look suspicious, boy?" The man's eyes flickered with a hint of irritation, but he kept his tone even. "I'm not causing any trouble, officer. I'm just enjoying my coffee." Thompson's temper flared. He couldn't stand being talked back to, especially by a black man. Without warning, he grabbed the man's coffee cup and threw its contents in his face. "Get out of here before I arrest you for loitering," he growled. The man wiped the coffee from his face, his expression unreadable. "I think you need to calm down, officer. There's no need for this." Thompson laughed harshly. "You think I need to calm down? You're the one who needs to learn some respect." The cafe owner, Maria, stepped forward, her eyes blazing with anger. "Officer, that's enough. He hasn't done anything wrong." Thompson turned on her, his face red with rage. "Stay out of this, lady. This is police business." The man raised a hand to stop Maria. "It's okay, Maria. I'll leave." As he walked away, Thompson couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had shown the man his place, or so he thought. The man walked away from the cafe, his mind racing. He had been humiliated in front of everyone, but he knew he couldn't let it show. He took a deep breath and continued down the street, his destination clear. The Newbridge Police Department was housed in a large, imposing building just a few blocks away. As he approached, he could feel the weight of the badge he had pinned to his suit jacket. He was no ordinary citizen. He was the newly appointed police chief, Michael Carter. Chief Carter had been brought in from another city to help reform the Newbridge Police Department, which had a long history of corruption and racial bias. He had only been on the job for a few days, but he had already made it clear that things were going to change. As he entered the building, he was greeted by the familiar faces of the officers. Some looked at him with curiosity, while others seemed wary. He nodded to them and made his way to his office. Once inside, he took off his jacket and hung it on the coat rack. He looked at himself in the mirror, the coffee stains still visible on his face. He wiped them away with a tissue and took a deep breath. "Today is the day," he muttered to himself. "No more humiliation, no more injustice." He sat down at his desk and picked up the phone. It was time to make some calls. Officer Thompson was back at the station, feeling pleased with himself. He had shown that black man who was boss, and he was sure that he had sent a clear message to anyone else who might think about causing trouble. As he was filling out his report, his supervisor, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, walked up to his desk. She was a no-nonsense woman in her late 40s with a reputation for being fair but firm. "Thompson, Chief Carter wants to see you in his office," she said, her voice neutral. Thompson's heart sank. He had heard rumors about the new chief, but he hadn't expected to be called in so soon. He nodded and stood up, trying to hide his nervousness. When he entered the chief's office, he found Carter sitting behind his desk, his expression stern. Thompson swallowed hard and stood at attention. "Officer Thompson, I understand you had an encounter with a man outside a cafe this morning," Carter said, his voice calm but authoritative. Thompson nodded. "Yes, sir. He was acting suspicious, and I thought it was best to intervene." Carter leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "And you thought it was appropriate to throw coffee in his face?" Thompson's face turned red. "He was being disrespectful, sir. I had to show him who was in charge." Carter shook his head. "Respect isn't something you can demand, officer. It's something you earn. And throwing coffee at someone is not the way to earn it." Thompson opened his mouth to argue, but Carter held up a hand. "I want you to listen to me very carefully. The Newbridge Police Department has a long history of corruption and racial bias. I was brought in to change that, and I won't tolerate any behavior that undermines that mission." Thompson's eyes widened. "You mean you're the new chief?" Carter nodded. "That's right. And I expect every officer in this department to uphold the highest standards of professionalism and integrity. Is that understood?" Thompson nodded, his face pale. "Yes, sir." Carter leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "Good. Now, go back to your desk and think about what you've done, and consider yourself on probation until further notice." Thompson saluted and turned to leave, his mind reeling. He had just humiliated the new police chief, and he had no idea what was going to happen next. As soon as Thompson left, Carter picked up the phone and dialed Lieutenant Mitchell's number. "Sarah, I need you to pull Thompson's file and start an investigation into his conduct," he said. "I want to know everything about him, from his hiring date to his most recent performance reviews." Mitchell's voice was steady. "Yes, sir. I'll get right on it." Carter hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He knew that Thompson was just the tip of the iceberg. The Newbridge Police Department was rife with officers who had similar attitudes and behaviors, and he needed to root them out. He picked up a pen and began to make a list of priorities. First, he needed to implement sensitivity training for all officers. Second, he needed to establish a system for reporting and investigating incidents of misconduct. And third, he needed to build a culture of accountability and transparency within the department. As he was writing, there was a knock on the door. He looked up to see Maria standing there, her expression determined. "Chief Carter, I need to talk to you," she said. Carter nodded and gestured for her to sit down. "What can I do for you, Maria?" Maria took a deep breath. "I saw what happened this morning. Officer Thompson humiliated you, and I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. It's not right and it shouldn't have happened." Carter smiled warmly. "Thank you, Maria. I appreciate your support, but I want you to know that I'm not going to let this slide. I'm going to make sure that things change around here." Maria nodded. "I believe you. And if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." Carter stood up and extended his hand. "Thank you, Maria. I'll definitely keep that in mind." As she left, Carter felt a renewed sense of determination. He knew that the road ahead would be tough, but he was ready to face it head on. The investigation into Officer Thompson's conduct was thorough and revealing. Lieutenant Mitchell and her team uncovered a pattern of racial bias and misconduct that stretched back years. It was clear that Thompson was not an isolated case. He was part of a larger problem within the department. Carter called a meeting of all the officers to address the findings. The room was tense as he stood at the front, his expression stern. "Officers, I want to be clear about something," he began. "The behavior we uncovered in Officer Thompson's file is unacceptable. It goes against everything we stand for as a police department, and it will not be tolerated." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We are here to protect and serve, not to oppress and humiliate. And if you have any issues with that, then this is not the place for you." The room was silent as the officers absorbed his words. Some looked ashamed, while others looked defiant. But Carter could see that he had made an impact. After the meeting, he called Thompson into his office once again. This time the officer looked nervous and contrite. "Chief, I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for what I did," Thompson said, his voice low. "I was wrong, and I won't let it happen again." Carter studied him for a moment. "I appreciate your apology, officer, but words alone won't change anything. You need to prove that you can be a better officer." Thompson nodded. "I will, sir. I promise." Carter leaned back in his chair. "I'm going to give you a chance to redeem yourself, but you'll be under close supervision, and if you slip up again, you'll be off the force permanently. Is that understood?" Thompson nodded again. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." As Thompson left, Carter felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could turn this department around. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Carter implemented sensitivity training for all officers, established a system for reporting and investigating misconduct, and worked tirelessly to build a culture of accountability and transparency. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of bumps along the way, but he was determined to see it through. One of the biggest challenges was dealing with the public's perception of the police department. Years of corruption and racial bias had left many residents distrustful and wary. Carter knew that he needed to rebuild that trust, and he started by reaching out to community leaders and holding town hall meetings. At one of these meetings, a young black woman named Jasmine stood up and spoke passionately about her experiences with the police. She had been stopped and searched multiple times for no reason, and she had seen friends and family members treated unfairly. "Chief Carter, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but it's going to take more than words to change things," she said. "We need to see real action, real change." Carter nodded. "You're right, Jasmine, and I'm committed to making that change happen. But I need your help too. We need to work together to build a better future for Newbridge." Jasmine looked at him for a moment, her expression skeptical but hopeful. "Okay, Chief, I'll give you a chance, but I'll be watching." Carter smiled. "I wouldn't expect anything less." As the months passed, the department began to see real progress. Officers were more respectful and professional, and the number of complaints about misconduct decreased significantly. Carter continued to hold town hall meetings and work closely with community leaders, and the public's perception of the police department began to improve. But Carter knew that the battle for justice was far from over. There were still officers who resisted change, and there were still systemic issues that needed to be addressed. He was committed to seeing it through, no matter how long it took. It was a year after the incident with Officer Thompson, and the Newbridge Police Department was a different place. The culture of accountability and transparency had taken root, and officers were more respectful and professional than ever before. The number of complaints had decreased dramatically, and the public's perception of the police had improved significantly. Carter stood in his office, looking out the window at the bustling city below. He had come a long way since that humiliating day outside the cafe, and he was proud of what he had accomplished, but he knew that there was still more work to be done. He picked up the phone and dialed Lieutenant Mitchell's number. "Sarah, I need you to schedule a meeting with the community leaders. It's time to discuss the next phase of our reform efforts." Mitchell's voice was enthusiastic. "Yes, sir, I'll get right on it." As he hung up the phone, Carter felt a sense of satisfaction. He had transformed the Newbridge Police Department, but he knew that the real transformation was just beginning. The fight for justice was a lifelong battle, and he was committed to seeing it through. He walked over to the window and looked out at the city once more. Newbridge was a better place now, and he was proud to be a part of that change. But he knew that the real victory would come when every citizen felt safe and respected, no matter their race or background. With a renewed sense of purpose, he turned back to his desk and began to plan for the future. The journey was far from over, but he was ready to take the next step. And that's the story of Chief Michael Carter and his incredible journey to transform the Newbridge Police Department. It's a tale of resilience, courage, and the power of one man to make a difference. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to a One Storyteller for more gripping tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Until next time, stay tuned for more incredible stories.